There was a time when a neighborhood wasn't just a place you lived in. It was a family you belonged to. A time when doors were rarely locked, and greetings weren't hurried nods, but moments of genuine care. You knew every face on your street. The Johnsons with their cherry tree in the yard, Mrs. Taylor who always smelled of fresh bread, and Mr. Daniels who sat on his porch every evening, waving at every passing car. Back then, community meant something real. People didn't just coexist. They shared life together. If your roof leaked, your neighbor showed up with a ladder before you even asked. If someone fell ill, casseroles appeared at their doorstep before the sun went down. And if a child misbehaved, well, every adult in town felt they had the right to correct them. It wasn't about interference. It was about responsibility, a kind of shared guardianship of one another's lives. The lines between mine and yours blurred in the most beautiful way. You could step outside and smell dinner cooking from 5 different homes. Meatloaf from one, stew from another. You'd hear the crackling of radios, the faint sound of news anchors announcing local fairs or high school games. Evenings were sacred. People sat on porches, drank lemonade, and talked. Not through screens, but through smiles and stories. Those small moments, they stitched entire neighborhoods together. If you close your eyes, you can probably still remember it. The sound of that old wooden porch swing creaking gently in the evening breeze. It was never about the swing itself, but the stories that floated through the air while it moved back and forth, as time seemed to slow down. Every house had a porch back then. Some painted white, some faded by the years, but each one was a stage for conversation, laughter, and life. Neighbors didn't wait for invitations. They simply wandered over when the day began to cool. One person brought pie, another brought news, and someone else always brought that deep, familiar laugh that made the whole street feel alive. The front porch was more than wood and nails. It was the heart of the home, a bridge between the private and the public, between your family and the one next door. Children played in the yards, their laughter echoing through the neighborhood. You'd hear the sound of a baseball hitting a glove, the bouncing of a rubber ball on the sidewalk, the occasional bark of a dog chasing someone's hat down the street. And above all that, you'd hear voices, grown-ups talking about life, not rushing through it. That's where lessons were passed down. Not in classrooms, but in those little moments when stories replaced lectures. Old men would sit with iced tea in hand, recalling what life was like before the war, and everyone listened. Women swapped recipes, shared worries, and traded laughter as if it were a form of currency. The porch was a place where time stood still long enough for people to see each other. Really see. If someone walked by, you waved. If someone stopped, you made room. And before you knew it, an ordinary Thursday evening turned into a gathering that lasted till the stars came out. No one scrolled through devices or rushed to finish a show. The entertainment was right there, in the rhythm of conversation and the comfort of company. The glow of a porch light was an open invitation, a silent way of saying, "You're welcome here." Sometimes the whole street seemed to breathe in unison. The hum of cicadas, the smell of someone's barbecue drifting through the air, the sound of laughter carrying across yards. And when someone said goodnight, they meant it. They meant, "I'll see you tomorrow." Those porches held more than people, they held memories. The first shy conversation between young love, the announcement of a baby on the way, the grieving of a loss shared in quiet understanding. It was the place where life unfolded naturally, side by side, one story at a time. Today, most porches are empty. The swings hang still, the chairs collect dust, and the glow of blue screens has replaced the golden porch light. But if you listen closely enough, you might still hear echoes of laughter carried on the wind, whispers from an era when community wasn't a word you used, but a feeling you lived. Because back then, it didn't matter what you had or how much you earned. What mattered was who would show up when you called. And somehow, someone always did. There used to be a time when a simple trip to the corner store could brighten your whole day. Not because of what you bought, but because of who you met along the way. You didn't need directions. Everyone knew where it was. That little shop on the corner, tucked between the barber's and the post office, was the heartbeat of the neighborhood. You could hear the jingle of the doorbell as soon as someone stepped inside, followed by the familiar voice of the shopkeeper saying, "Morning there. How's your mama doing?" There was no scanning barcodes or rushing through aisles. You took your time, looked around, talked a little, laughed a little. Shelves were stacked with the basics: bread, canned goods, soap, maybe a few candies by the counter. But what made the store special wasn't what it sold. It was the people. The corner store was where stories were exchanged, where neighbors met halfway between errands and life. Old Mr. Benson, who owned the place for 40 years, knew every family by name. He remembered birthdays, asked about school plays, and noticed when someone hadn't been around for a while. Sometimes he'd slip an extra piece of candy into a kid's paper bag and say, "Don't tell your folks." He meant it kindly, like everyone did back then. The place had its rhythm. Mornings were for the working men grabbing coffee and a newspaper before heading out. Afternoons belonged to the mothers picking up a few things for dinner. Evenings were when kids came running in with coins they'd saved all week, deciding between chocolate or bubble gum. It was the kind of place that smelled like wood floors, flour dust, and freshly opened soda bottles. And the conversations, they filled the air as much as the smell of ground coffee and sugar. Someone would lean on the counter, talking about a neighbor's new baby. Another would come in, shaking their head over the latest town news. The storekeeper listened to it all, smiling, knowing he was the keeper of more than groceries. He was the keeper of connection. People lingered back then. Nobody was in a hurry. If you ran into someone you hadn't seen in a while, you stood there and talked for as long as it took. And when you left, you didn't say goodbye. You said, "See you tomorrow," because you really would. Even when times were hard, that store stood tall. During winter storms, when roads were slick and power went out, folks would gather inside just to stay warm together. The owner would light a lantern, and Sundays used to feel different. You could sense it the moment you woke up. The calm in the air, the smell of something cooking long before noon, the way the whole neighborhood seemed to move slower. The world wasn't in a rush that day. It was as if time itself respected Sunday. You'd hear the faint ring of church bells in the distance, and families would start getting ready. Mothers ironing dresses, fathers polishing shoes, children squirming as they were buttoned into their Sunday best. Cars lined up on quiet streets, and doors opened with laughter and warm voices. After church, that's when the magic really happened. The air filled with the smell of home-cooked meals. Pot roast, fried chicken, baked ham, fresh rolls right out of the oven. You could walk down the street and smell 10 different kinds of comfort all at once. Every house had its own recipe, its own rhythm, but the feeling was the same. Sunday meant gathering. Neighbors didn't need invitations. They just came by. Someone always had an extra chair or two, a folding table, and plenty of food to go around. Kids ran barefoot across the yards, chasing one another between clotheslines and sprinklers, while the adults sat under the shade of the porch, talking about life. The world felt smaller, safer, connected. And the laughter, that's what people remember most. The kind of laughter that echoed across backyards and stayed in your memory for years. Came easily back then, often over the simplest things. Someone's pie didn't set right. Someone else brought too much potato salad, and everyone teased them lovingly for it. It wasn't about perfection. It was about being together. Plates were passed around like love letters, full of warmth, effort, and care. Nobody cared about calories or presentation. You just ate, talked, and smiled. People lingered for hours, sometimes until sunset. The kids would fall asleep on the couch while the grown-ups told stories about back in their day. Even though their day wasn't so long ago, every meal was an unspoken reminder. This is what matters. Not money, not things, but moments. Shared moments that stitched lives together. If someone was new to the neighborhood, you didn't wait for them to introduce themselves. You showed up with a plate of food. If someone lost their job, everyone chipped in quietly. No speeches, no pity, just kindness. That's how people took care of each other. You didn't need a community group or a social app to connect. You had casseroles, open doors, and open hearts. And the elders, they were always the center of it all. Sitting at the head of the table, passing down stories with every spoonful. They'd talk about the old country, about wars survived, about hard years and good ones. Kids would listen wide-eyed, Not because they had to, but because those stories felt sacred. They were the history of a family, the heartbeat of a people. Sundays were also a time to slow down and reflect. Stores closed early, streets were quiet, and televisions were mostly off. The sound that filled the evening wasn't traffic or sirens. It was conversation, the soft clatter of dishes being washed, and maybe a radio humming in the background. And when the day ended, there was peace. Families sat together, sometimes just watching the sun fade through the window. They didn't need to go anywhere. Everything they needed was already there, at the table, in the laughter, in the presence of one another. Today, we still have Sundays, but they don't always feel the same. The world moves fast now. Meals are ordered through screens, and many people eat alone, scrolling while they chew. The tables are quieter, the recipes forgotten, the stories left untold. But for those who remember, truly remember, Sunday was more than a day. It was a feeling. It was the sound of children playing, the comfort of a meal made with love, and the warmth of knowing you belonged somewhere. You didn't have to be perfect. You just had to show up. And in return, you were fed, known, and loved. That was the beauty of it all, the sacred simplicity of being together. Back then, community wasn't something people talked about. It was something they lived. As the years passed, things began to change. Streets that once rang with laughter and conversation grew quieter. Porches were abandoned, replaced by garages and fences. Corner stores closed, replaced by big-box supermarkets and convenience chains. Sunday tables became smaller or disappeared altogether, as the pace of life grew faster and the world demanded more of everyone. It wasn't sudden. The shift came slowly, almost imperceptibly. First, the old families moved away, replaced by strangers who kept to themselves. Then the radios went silent, replaced by televisions, and later, by phones and screens that demanded attention but offered little connection. People were busier than ever, yet lonelier than before. And yet, the memory of that time still lingers, carried in the hearts of those who lived it. The warmth of neighbors who cared, the laughter spilling across yards, the smell of bread baking, the gentle rhythm of Sunday afternoons. These are not gone. They are just quieter, waiting for someone to notice, to remember, to bring them back. There are still pockets of it if you look closely. A front porch light glowing in the evening, signaling an open invitation. A corner store where the shopkeeper remembers your name. Families gathering after church, sharing a meal simply because they can. And in those moments, the past and present meet, reminding us that community is not a relic, but a choice we make each day. It begins with small acts. Greeting your neighbor with a smile, inviting someone over for tea, listening to a story without rushing, sharing what you have without expecting anything in return. These little gestures are echoes of what once was, and they carry the same power to build bonds and bring comfort. Because when neighbors were family, it wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about technology or possessions or social status. It was about being present, showing up, and caring. That is what made life slower, softer, and infinitely richer. That is what made communities worth remembering. So maybe today, as you walk down a familiar street or sit on a porch that hasn't seen much use, you can pause and imagine it. Children playing, voices mingling, laughter carried on the breeze. You can remember the warmth of shared meals, the corner store that always had a story, the kindness of people who treated you as part of their family. And if you carry that memory forward, even in small ways, you can bring a piece of it back into the world. A smile, a conversation, a plate of food passed over a fence. These are the threads that weave neighborhoods together. These are the ways we can light the last porch light, not just in memory, but in life. Because community was never just a place or a time. It was a feeling, a way of being, a shared heartbeat that connected us all. And though the world moves faster now, the heart of what it meant to belong, truly belong, is still within reach. All it takes is a moment of attention, a gesture of kindness, and the courage to show up. When neighbors were family, life was simple, full, and human. And the truth is, it can be again if we choose to remember and live it.